Within Atlantic Ocean, there's a conveyor belt running of water which ensures a lot of things, ensuring temperature around Europe being warm, ensuring that cold undercurrents are coming towards equator, ensuring predictability to monsoon as well. But the problem with this conveyor belt, which is Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation, that if this collapses, all of this will also collapse. And this is what is being predicted, that AMOC is around the collapse. That is another climate tipping point showing that we might not be able to redo what damage has already happened. Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Flash News. My name is Shubhangi Singh. In today's session, we are going to talk in detail that what exactly is AMOC, how does it impact the climate across the globe, and most importantly, why is it collapsing and what lies in danger if it does so. So let us begin with understanding what exactly is Atlantic Meridional Overturning circulation. Now, when we are talking about AMOC, you have to imagine a conveyor belt which is running across Atlantic Ocean. Now, what happens in this conveyor belt is that when we are talking about warm water, that warm water moves towards pole. So, as you can see in this given diagram, the Gulf Stream, the oceanic current Gulf Stream, which is warm and saline, it is moving towards north. But gradually, as this current is moving north, because of the reducing temperature towards the polar region, this turns into cold water, and this cold water dips inside. Now, the movement of it starts towards equator. Now, this is the North Atlantic current that we are talking about here, and this cycle goes on in a circular loop-like fashion. That is why I am saying this is more like a conveyor belt. That is why you have to imagine it as a conveyor belt which is constantly moving. Now the question here is, why is this moving? It is moving because of two things. First, thermal gradient. So the difference in temperature of water here, hot water rises up, and the salinity, the difference in salinity is responsible for this movement. So, thermal gradient and haline gradient. And furthermore, when you look at AMOC, this is part of bigger global thermohaline circulation, which is not just limited to this particular ocean, but runs across the world. Now, another important factor that we need to understand, that how it affects the climate. Now, when we are talking about AMOC being a conveyor belt, imagine it as also a AC and heater system. Because when the warm water is moving towards north, it ensures warmer temperature across Europe. And similarly, it brings in the colder waters towards the equatorial region, and this also furthermore works as a CO2 sink. This absorbs carbon dioxide, and this circulation also has a very direct linkage with not just rainfall but also monsoon. So I hope we have a fair clarity on what exactly is AMOC, how does it work, and what are the impacts that we are talking about it. Now let us move to understand, when we are talking about AMOC, that why it is so important. Now, because of the climate function that AMOC performs, this becomes very important for the global climate, because this is what ensures the mild climate in Western Europe. This is which ensures distribution of heat across the globe. Apart from that, it plays a very important role in controlling the position of ITCZ, Intertropical Convergence Zone. Now let us understand this. So when we are talking about ITCZ, it is that belt that lies near equator. Now how do we understand where does it lie? Another factor that you need to remember for it, that this is a low pressure belt, and this will be forming where there is convergence of both eastern and western trade winds. Now, because this is a low pressure zone, this is where maximum rainfall happens, And another thing that is associated with ITCZ is the fact that this keeps on shifting based on the temperature. The higher temperature where you will find movement of ITCZ will be in that direction. For example, when we are talking about northern hemisphere and we are seeing summer solstice, or when we are talking about summertime, the movement of ITCZ is towards north. But during the winter, when the warmer temperatures are present in southern hemisphere, ITCZ moves southwards. Now, ITCZ is responsible for rainfall. So, wherever there will be more heat, there will be more rainfall. So, if AMOC is weak and North Atlantic is not warm enough, ITCZ will remain comparatively souther. But if AMOC is strong, North Atlantic is warm, the movement of ITCZ would be towards north. Now, this movement of ITCZ affects rainfall, it affects monsoon. It affects the monsoon in Africa, it affects the monsoon in South Asia as well. Apart from that, I also mentioned that when we are talking about oceans playing a very important role in distribution of heat, they also play a very important role as a carbon sink, and AMOC is a very important factor herein. And another thing that has been highlighted by new papers that have been research paper that have been coming out, that this carbon sink, which is absorbing carbon, can become a carbon source. That means if AMOC collapses, carbon will be released from this. The sequestration which is being done, that will not be enabled. Apart from that, AMOC is responsible for biodiversity, it is responsible for sea level patterns which are seen across North Atlantic. Now, moving ahead from here, the next thing that we need to understand about AMOC, to understand that what will the collapse do, is why exactly we are expecting a collapse, why it is weakening. So, the first and the most probable answer that you would have also thought is that the temperatures are rising. We are clearly seeing that oceans are gradually warming up. That means the density, salinity difference which was leading to the density contrast and the thermal difference that was leading to the density contrast, that does not exist. So, if there is no difference as such, then we will not be seeing the movement of this conveyor belt. Apart from that, because the temperatures are rising, Greenland ice melt is intense. Now, when ice is melting, fresh water influx happens and the salinity is reduced. Now, you have to remember, especially when we are talking about polar regions, colder water, higher salinity, it goes down, it is denser, it goes deep down, and that is where it starts moving towards equator. And when salinity is not present, it will prevent sinking of dense water, again leading to weakening of AMOC. Furthermore, increased precipitation, higher temperatures, movement of ITCZ, more rainfall, more fresh water, weakened circulation. And then we also have to look at this conveyor belt, the whole mechanism itself. When we are talking about the salt advection feedback, which is disturbed by all of this, it leads to instability. So, we clearly know that when we were talking about AMOC, it was not a linear system. As it is not a linear system, any collapse anywhere can lead to disruption of this whole system in itself. And the effects are so intense that ocean currents, for example, Gulf Stream, is gradually weakening. Now that we have an idea that why this Atlantic Ocean current is expected to collapse and why it is weakening, now let us move to understand that how close the collapse is, or is it really happening. So, based on the research, we clearly get to see that 15% weakening has already happened, but the most recent studies highlight that there are higher risk, and what we were expecting to happen by 2100, that is expected to happen in coming decades. That means what we were thinking of happening in next 75 years is probable to happen in coming decades. And based on that, it is expected that we are close to a climate tipping point. That means irreversible damage that cannot be redone, that cannot be reversed at all, and it will have consequences. 40 to 60% damage is expected by 2100, and there is also a possibility of whole collapse, shutdown of this system. And this is where we clearly get to see that if AMOC collapses or shuts down or weakens in coming time, this is where the climate change, which puts out the effects very clear, which we are already seeing, thus changes, those effects will be way more vivid. And not just for the countries along the Atlantic Ocean, along North Atlantic, but where we are present in South Asia as well, and most specifically when we are talking about our country there as well. Now let us straight away move to understand that what will be the consequences across, starting with climate impacts. Direct climate impacts would be seen specifically across Europe because severe cooling would be possible and enhanced warming might be seen in tropical region. Rainfall disruption because ITCZ will shift more prominently south and it will affect and weaken the monsoon system as well. Furthermore, we can expect sea level rises across the US east coast here and also in Europe. And as I said, CO2 sink might turn into CO2 source. That is also a possibility which will set in a loop because more carbon dioxide release will lead to further global warming enhancement as well. And this is going to impact the biodiversity, the fisheries, and lead to marine biodiversity loss. Now coming to answering the question that we started with, that how it is going to affect India. The direct link here is very simple. As I have already mentioned that ITCZ will shift south, monsoon will weaken, this whole cycle, and because of that there will be more unpredictability. There is a possibility that monsoon might come in late, leave early. There will be droughts and floods at the same time, and to understand and predict them, that would be impossible. In this order, what will be the effect? First, indirect effect on agriculture, which is still heavily dependent on monsoon. Then this will directly impact water security because many of our rivers across, and when we are talking about aquifers, they are rain fed. Then all of this will lead to economic impacts. If primary sector is suffering, GDP will be sensitive to that. Prices will increase, and this can have a whole direct impact on Indian economy as well. Now my question to you here is, we know this big situation is present, but at the same time, we clearly get to see that world is fighting on other issues. The world is not blinking an eye towards climate change, rather they are just focused on fighting on the exhaustible resources in the worst way possible. But what do you think is a definite need of the time to be done, way forward? Let me know in the comment section, and I will be leaving you here with a prelims question as well. Let me know the answer in the comment section. Very common format of question, very important topic from the syllabus itself. So let me know the answer in the comment section. That was all from my side. Thank you so much.